97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
We expect to win every time we step on the field. That's just the mindset that we have.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and there's a lot to dive into as we get ready for – it's so weird. By now, the Eagles would have played a preseason game by now, right? This past Thursday would have been their first preseason game, and it feels like the Eagles and football are so lost in the sauce right now.
I think it's crazier that I didn't even realize that. Because there's
Thursday
so
night.
much else going on. Flyers, all this great stuff that it went right over my head.
Thursday night would have been the first preseason game. Their second one would be coming up. Now, they had canceled 4 or gone down to 2, and the first preseason game under that scenario was going to be the 20th. But now, of course, there's no preseason games. So when are we going to see some football? There's a lot of news and stuff to get into with the Eagles. Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, and he joins us for a Mosher Monday here on Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Mosh, what's up, pal?
How are you guys doing? Happy Monday to both of you.
Yeah, man. Think about that. The Eagles would have played Thursday night if everything was normal, and we would be locked in on football. And now it seems like football is so under the radar, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, this is the time of the year where we're already complaining about play calling and the Hall of Fame game and so-and-so doesn't look good. And it does feel like we are far away from even getting the parts of practice where we get to at least say, hey, this guy stands out, that guy stands out. But we're far, but we're not. I mean, today is the 10th. I believe the 16th is when the start, actually the 12th, I think, is the start of a little bit more of a ramp up, and the 16th even more so. So by this time next week, Mike, we may be able to talk about somebody who did something interesting in practice. Therefore, if only if someone's available to see it, though.
We would be knee deep, though. We would be knee deep into the conversation of, should they play more? Preseason doesn't matter. These guys aren't playing. I mean, that second preseason game has really become a nothing burger. So, hey, it is what it is. But as you said, there is some storylines. Let's go to, I know it happened on Friday. Adam was on Friday's edition, but I know Vinny Curry is a guy you know very well. You did a lot of reporting on this. He re-signs with the Eagles. It's a 1-year deal. Let's kind of get into why Philadelphia and how he fits in. I know you have some insight on why he chose Philly.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this was one of the more strange sagas that I've covered because the Eagles, I've been reporting on Inside the Birds that the Eagles and Vinny have been in discussions going back, months now. There was a time where Vinny's half-brother passed away and things got tabled, and then they started to be close again. And then as recently as last week, I was starting to hear some sources saying that it probably wasn't going to happen with Vinny and the Eagles. And there were some AFC teams that were interested. And Cleveland made a very competitive offer and a better financial offer, as I understand. But at the end of the day, I think, and we're seeing this all around sports, athletes are making decisions that aren't always based about the money. They're making decisions in this kind of year, especially based on health and safety and family. And obviously Vinny's from New Jersey. He's comfortable with the Eagles. He has opportunity for playing time here. He just can't guarantee. He went to Tampa Bay a long time ago after the Eagles cut him after the Super Bowl, and he didn't have a good experience there. He made more money, but it wasn't a great experience for him. He got hurt that year as well, but even then, he wasn't loving his time in Tampa Bay. And the Eagles are just a team that makes sense for him, and he was, at the end of the day, willing to make the deal work for him as long as the Eagles were going to be at least competitive with their offer, which they ended up being.
So let me get your thoughts on why the Eagles decided now to bring him back. Mm-hmm. What does it mean for this defensive line rotation, and what does it say, I guess, about the other guys here? Because I'm imagining they got to a point which there is no training camp. We haven't seen anything. So why did they now feel that they needed an upgrade at that spot?
Yeah, there's a couple of layers to this. First, I have a couple of coaching sources tell me, and even recently as last week, someone reemphasized this to me, that they feel like versatility is going to be more key this year than ever before. And that's obviously because we don't know if rosters are going to wind up being really impacted by COVID or not. And, you can fill spots. You can have 3 guys go down to COVID and pull 3 guys up from your practice squad or off the street, but then you have to worry about acclimating them to your scheme and your system and hoping that they can play certain positions. The one thing we know about Vinny is he knows the scheme, he knows the team, and he is versatile. In fact, he really did his best work last year in December when he finally got playing time as a interior pass rusher. They would go to their NASCAR package, sort of NASCAR package, because they still would have 1 defensive tackle, Fletcher Cox, on the field. But Vinny would move inside to defensive tackle, and then they would have 2 other defensive ends on the outside. And he did a really good job as an interior pass rusher. So you look at this year, and that's an area where Vinny can help if there's injuries, if there's, roster depletion for whatever. You've got a guy who can come in and play defensive end for you. You can have a guy who can come in and move inside in the pass rush and play defensive tackle. And secondly, if you really look at the Eagles' defensive end situation, you have 2 knowns in Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham as far as they're your starters. And then everybody else, whether they're a mixture of draft picks or acquisitions, I don't know if any of them are considered really well-rounded potential starters. We'll have to see on Sharif Miller. He's kind of a big question mark because I drafted him last year, but he didn't play. I did hear he put on some good weight and looks good, so we'll see. But Josh Sweat is a guy who has only played situationally so far. They have concerns about his knees holding up. I don't know that if Barnett or Graham were to get hurt, if Josh Sweat is a guy that you want out there on 1st and 2nd down stopping the run, because he's just not built that way. And then the same thing with Jannard Avery and Joe Osman, who are those kind of change-up type pass rushers. They're not guys who can stop the run on 1st or 2nd down very well. And you never know what you're going to get from the kid that they drafted, Casey Toohill. So if Barnett or Graham were to get hurt, I think Vinny Curry, out of everybody now, is that natural guy who can come in and start, maybe play 1st or 2nd down. And if he's not part of the nickel pass rush, that's okay because they have other guys that are meant for that role as well.
Do you think that he can replicate the same type of production as he did last year? I would say that most people were probably pleasantly surprised with how he played. Do you think that he can have that type of season again at his age?
It's a good question. I don't see why not, because in this system, Hunter, everybody's reps are monitored. Nobody has to play 80% of the reps. And it just depends on how they plan to use Vinny. So right now he's not going to start, so you would think he would be either situational pass rusher or he's the 1st and 2nd down, 2nd string, 1st and 2nd down defensive end. You go back a couple of years ago, Bo Allen was kind of like that. He was that 2nd string defensive tackle on the Super Bowl team. He wasn't a great pass rusher. He was not out there as a starter, nor was he out there a lot on 3rd down, but he was out there as your 2nd string run stopping unit. So I think they can do a number of things with Vinny, and he can be successful because he's basically done it all. When he was a starter in 2017, he played 1st and 2nd down, and he came off the field for pass rush. Last year, when they needed interior pass rushers, he didn't start, but they would put him in on the inside on 2nd and long and 3rd down, and he did well from there. And that's always been the case with Vinny. He's never going to give you 15 sacks. He's not Von Miller, but he can play pretty much any position, and he keeps his body in good condition, and he can give you really good, solid production no matter where you put him. I don't think a year later is going to make a big difference for a guy like him because he's just never played, 70 to 100% of the snaps.
One thing is, you mentioned about that NASCAR package where he slides in. You got Malik Jackson, you got Hargrave. Is there going to be as many opportunities for him to do that?
Probably not to start off with, and then hopefully everybody makes it kind of healthy to the training camp finish line. Ideally, if things are going well for the Eagles, as you mentioned, Mike, they've got a trio of interior pass rushers. They already have to figure out how to get those 3 defensive tackles on the field and maximize their production. So I think right now they see Vinny as a backup defensive end. And, again, he's probably going to come in on 1st. And, if the Eagles defenses are on the field, right, and you've got Barnett and you've got Graham, and the opponent picks up a couple of 1st downs and they're driving. Well, those guys are going to get subbed out, and Vinny and somebody else are going to get subbed in for a series or two to keep legs fresh. That's how I see it now. And then we'll just see as the season goes on, as the pass rush packages develop, if there's a role for Vinny in that.
I'm looking at you bring Vinny Curry back, and I was reading an article today at ESPN.com, one of the insider articles about teams' rankings of top 25-year-old talent and under. On that list, Philadelphia ranked 29th in the league, which is essentially, third or fourth from the bottom. So what is the message when you bring Vinny Curry in? He's an older guy. I mean, is this suggesting that the Eagles, they don't have apparently ESPN doesn't look at their younger players on this roster and say, hey, they got a lot of young guys coming through the pipeline. This move kind of says, hey, we think we can win a Super Bowl this year, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think the moves that the team makes are ever – I don't think any offseason is ever geared toward not winning the Super Bowl. I think Howie's been pretty upfront. He said some offseasons you definitely have to treat differently, and you have to start to replenish your roster with younger talent. That's why they did this year with the draft. They had a lot of picks, used almost all of them, if not all of them, double digits, I believe, in draft pick selections. But they're not just trying to refurbish or rebuild in a year. They're also trying to win, and the offensive and defensive lines are an area that they always look to fortify. So they'll put that risk down to bring in a Jason Peters and a Vinny Curry to be strong there, because they know that being strong there gives them a better chance to win the Super Bowl. The question is, are you stunting the development of some of those youth? You can make that argument for Matt Pryor. Certainly was going to have an opportunity to start with Jason Peters, now probably not. And you can make the argument sort of, I guess similarly, for whoever doesn't make the team at defensive end, because Vinny does. But that might be someone like Casey Tuhill, who's a 7th-round pick. It might be Joe Osman, who is a rookie free agent. It's not like either of those two, Peters or Vinny, are standing in the way of a 1st or a 2nd-round pick making his mark on this team.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, of course, football at 4. Vinny Curry signed last week, and late last week, getting some more insight on that move. There was some thought that he had a better deal, correct, from Cleveland, was it?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So the fact that he decides to come here, and I guess the COVID stuff has a lot to do with it and all that stuff, does that suggest that he thinks he's going to have a bigger role here? Or were they going to have similar roles?
Probably similar. I mean, Cleveland has 2 pretty good starters at defensive end as well, right? They have Myles Garrett, one of the nicest young pass rushers in the league. And they have, who's the veteran that came over from the Giants, whose name, Olivier Vernon?
Yep.
Right, and I believe they've got Adrian Claiborne as a 3rd or a 4th defensive end. So I think it's fairly similar. But here's the thing: when you go to a place like Vinny did in Tampa, right, you just don't get the benefit of the doubt. When he was in Tampa, he got hurt a little bit, and then there was a defensive end there whose names escaped me. He was a Penn Stater, so I should remember his name. He had actually come over from Cleveland, who got a few reps in there and wound up having a few sacks while Vinny was out, and then they kind of said, all right, we're going to stick with this. We're going to stick with the hot hand, right? And you go to Cleveland, you just never know. New coaching staff, new regime. When you're in Philadelphia and you've performed and the coaches know what you can do, be less inclined to skip over you, I think. They'll go to old reliable when they need it. And, again, the comfort, the scheme, everything. So Vinny's looking at this saying, in order to get snaps, I have to basically beat out Josh Sweat, who I was outperforming last year by December anyway, Sharif Miller, who's never played a game, Jannard Avery, who's only played a few snaps as an Eagle and is really not a defensive and a pure 4-3 D end as the others are. So I think Vinny does look at it and say, the coaches like me, they know me, they want me, and so if there's an opportunity to get playing time, I'm not going to get passed up for this, that, and the other.
Does this move of Vinny Curry make the Eagles higher on your list when it comes to the rest of the league? Like, if you're going to rank the Eagles' defensive line, does this move the needle that much, or not so much because his impact won't be as big as, say, how good Malik Jackson or Fletcher Cox or Brandon Graham plays?
No, I think it's significant for the injury thing I mentioned. If Derek Barnett's been hurt twice. If he were to get hurt again, or if Brandon Graham gets hurt, I just don't know how comfortable I feel with Barnett and Sweat, or Barnett and Sharif Miller, or Barnett and whoever, as I would be, especially on first and second down, because Vinny plays the run really well, as I would be as if you put Vinny Curry in there, and then those other guys I mentioned are situational pass rushers as we've seen so far, because there's just a lot of unknown with those guys. So with Vinny, there's the known, and then when you look at the defensive line in totality, and you see Brandon and Malik Jackson and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave and Vinny, I mean, that's an established defensive line there. I mean, that's a really good, strong, deep defensive line, to the point where if they do get some really positive, pleasant surprise kind of production out of whether it's Sweat or Miller or Jernard Avery or Casey Tuhill or whatever, you're just now adding gravy to the pot here.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, and, of course, Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. What's the story with Jatavius Brown? I mean, this kind of came out of right field. I don't know what kind of role he would have had, but here's a position that they really need help, and they just lost the guy that they brought in here this offseason.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to me to see kind of the wave of reaction turn against Jatavius Brown. So now people are I've seen on Twitter or social media, even some people on our Inside the Birds Facebook group page saying, I don't know if this is a big deal. He wasn't going to make a team anyway. It's not that good. When he was on the team, it's like, oh, we expect a lot. This guy's athletic. He have a way better year. But as soon as he's off the team, it's like, he wasn't that good anyway. Look, all I can tell you is, I know this from a coaching source, that this shocked them. They did not see it coming. It wasn't something COVID related. It wasn't something that they could have predicted. And it really was about Jatavius on his own deciding that he was done with football. And, without hearing from Jatavius himself, it's hard to get inside his head, speak for him. But, he is a guy who has dealt with injuries in the past. And we've seen this with guys who played linebacker, whether it's the head injuries or even Andrew Luck as a quarterback. He was just tired of rehabbing, and he gave it up. And we're seeing that a little bit more these days, where guys are really looking out for their bodies and their future. And he just told the team, I'm sorry, that's it. I'm just not in it anymore. And so you can say it's not a big deal because who knows if he was going to make the team. But honestly, he was their most veteran linebacker. Doesn't mean he was definitely going to make the team, but I think he stood a pretty good shot. I mean, he's one of the few linebackers that they've had that's played a couple of years in this league and has been a starter. So now you're looking at it where you've got Nate Gary, TJ Edwards, Duke Riley, Davion Taylor, and, you'll hear Adam and I talk more about Davion Taylor on the next Inside the Birds and forward. I think people really need to temper their expectations for him. He's about as raw and as much of a project as it comes. So having a guy like Jatavius Brown would have been helpful. I think he would have competed to start as an outside linebacker and maybe a nickel linebacker, and now they're left with, the same old names that I'm recirculating. This is not a good linebacker group by NFL standards.
If each position on this team plays the best of their ability, plays to the best that they possibly can play, will this current linebacker core work?
If each, you mean, is the team strong enough elsewhere to compensate for the linebacker?
Yes, exactly.
That's who knows? I don't know if anybody can come into the box and play from the secondary, the run as well as Malcolm Jenkins can. Look out, the good veteran safety. I assume he's going to be more deep safety in their cover 1, cover 3 look, and that Will Parks and Jalen Mills are going to be guys that are up in the box a little bit more. And as good as they can they be Malcolm Jenkins? Can they help alleviate that? You could play nickel against the Giants, against the Cowboys, with just 2 linebackers on the field because you knew you had Malcolm Jenkins as kind of a third linebacker to come down from the safety spot. Can you now continue to be in nickel, which is what most teams want to be in defensively, and then rely on one of those other safeties that I just mentioned to come into the box and stop a guy like Ezekiel Elliott or Saquon Barkley or whoever's going to be getting the rock for Washington? Adrian Peterson's a big guy. I don't know. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. I think it's going to be a difficult ask.
Yeah, and I know that there are a couple of situations, I guess, that could come forward. When is this? Typically you're in training camp. You'll get a couple of veterans cut, or you get that wave of cuts. Do you anticipate that happening?
Yes, I've anticipated it for a while. I thought Howie might add linebacker group even before the start of camp, and maybe he still will before they start to, really ramp up the next week or so. Maybe he will add somebody. Maybe he'll wait. He'll get a look at the young guys here throughout camp and then wait until those cuts are made and then maybe make a waiver wire addition. But I would be stunned if he didn't make some kind of veteran addition to this group. Stunned.
All right, there you go. Geoff Mosher would be stunned if they don't bring in a guy. I mean, is there a guy that's still free, or do you think he's on another roster right now?
Well, the funny thing is, we were going through, Adam Kaplan and I were going through free agents, right, at the linebacker position, and as they are every year in August, it's not good, right? You go look at the names, and some of them I don't have off the top of my head right now, but he named 3 or 4, and both of us agree that's not really good. But would you take those 3 or 4 over the top Eagles 3 or 4 linebackers? For example, if you just released all Eagles linebackers, signed the top 4 free agents, and then made a comparison of who you'd rather have, are you sure you wouldn't actually be taking those free agent linebackers because at least they've played in the league, they have experience, you've seen what they can do? It's a good argument. I mean, look, I'm not trying to kill the Eagles linebackers. I think T.J. Edwards showed you something a little bit last year for a rookie free agent, but he's really a rundown linebacker. And Nate Gary can cover a little bit. He's seen that. But if those guys were all released tomorrow, every other team would be looking at them saying the same things we're saying now about the free agent linebackers.
Well, you mentioned Taylor, their third-round pick, and you mentioned how we should lower expectations for him because, he did get drafted high. You would think if he was drafted that high that he would be more ready to play than maybe he is. What should we expect out of him?
All right, so there's layers to that. Yeah, the Eagles drafted him in the 3rd round. When I looked around the league and, we did this for Jalen Hurts and other guys and asked other scouts if they felt that Davion Taylor was a true 3rd-round player, I kind of got some, I don't know about that. I don't think so. Clearly the Eagles prioritize his athleticism and his speed, his traits in making him a 3rd-round pick. So, that's what they were looking for, and that's what they've got. But he has not played a lot of football. He has a ton of learning to do, and they're not getting a real opportunity the way they have been in the past because of no OTAs and even this kind of weird training camp to really, really fully get the full-on learning experience. And so I would expect for him to be behind even most rookies at this point. And it wouldn't shock me if you heard more positive things about Sean Bradley early on because he may not be the athlete that Davion Taylor is, which is why he was a 6th or 7th round pick, but he is a linebacker through and through. He's played the position for a while. He's very smart, coachable kid. So to get back to Davion Taylor, I think the best expectations you can have is that he gets on the special teams and gets out there and uses that speed and athleticism, makes some plays, and hopefully by middle or the end of the season he can get on the field in the defense a little bit, but I would not hold my breath on that.
Chiefs-Texans open the NFL season 1 month from today, and we hope to see that game. We shall see. Looks like college football could be in some trouble, which means the NFL could move to all sorts of days. You could have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Thursday NFL games, and we'll always have football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher at Geoff Mosher NFL. All right, Mosher, take care, pal.
All right, fellas. Have a great day.
How about that? 1 month from today is the start of the NFL season.